Don't get me wrong, I'm really excited for this lens. I just can't believe it took this long to make. Hello everyone, my name's Josh from Videos by Josh, and today I want to talk to you about the newly announced Sigma 70-200 F2.8 DG DN OS sports telephoto lens. This is a new lens announced by lens manufacturer Sigma to be coming out in December of 2023. And to say this lens is highly anticipated is an understatement. Sigma already has two incredible zooms in the holy-trinity zoom range, and this supposedly is going to round out the set for E-mount and L-mount quite nicely. The 70-200 zoom lens is often the crown of a lens portfolio for a lens manufacturer. It's often the longest 2.8 lens that you'll get in a zoom set, barring some pretty expensive investment. And a lot of photographers use them for a lot of work. Video, portrait, headshot, wildlife. They're very versatile lenses. But let's get into the features of this specific new lens from Sigma. So right off the bat, it's going to be a flagship 2.8 constant aperture lens. It's going to have the same great high-speed autofocus that we can expect from Sigma. It's also going to have optical stabilization, which in this category is almost a must, given how long you're going to be zooming. It's going to have weather resistance, as I would expect from a sport lens from Sigma. And here's a change from the norm. It's going to have a manual aperture ring, which is something we've only been seeing quite recently on the Sigma lenses, like with the 85-1.4. This manual aperture ring has been present on the Sony lenses for a lot longer, like their original prime 85GM. The lens comes in the standard black finish from Sigma. It's got a tripod collar and a nice looking lens hood. Overall, I think the build construction is going to be great. The lens has been set with a release date of December 2023, so I think if you end up with one of these under the tree, you've done quite well for yourself. Now I'd like to take you back on a bit of a story from when I was purchasing my 70-200 lens. This was maybe 3 or 4 years ago. I had to choose between the existing offerings of the Tamron 75-180 F2.8 and the Sony 70-200 F4 because I could not afford at the time the G Master version, which was prohibitively expensive. And I don't know if I've mentioned this, but Tamron, Sigma, and a handful of other brands have often made it their business case to undercut Sony because top-tier Sony lenses, as is typical, are quite expensive. I'd also like to say that at the time, the Tamron 35-150 2-2.8 wasn't out yet, and that's a really interesting lens. I'd love to give that one a try. But anyway, I had to choose between the Sony and the Tamron for my reach. You know what? I chose the Sony over the Tamron. The Sony had image stabilization. It had a longer reach. It was better weather sealed. You know, I'm going to be frank with you guys. Sometimes I don't particularly like the build quality on the Tamarons. And this decision was made a bit more difficult because Sigma did not have anything in the offering for E-mount at the time. Anyway, so funny thing is, I had the exact same dilemma when buying my 24-70 zoom. I was trying to choose between the Tamron 28-75, the prohibitively expensive Sony GM 24-70 2.8. Finally, and this is the difference, there was the Sigma 24-70, which I absolutely love, and I know a lot of people do too. It's a bit heavy. It doesn't autofocus quite as fast as the Sony. You know what I find on my copy, if I'm nitpicking, there's a bit of exaggerated barrel distortion on the wide end, but for the price, it's completely worth it. The Sigma comes in at less than half the price of Sony, which is exactly where I like my Sigmas. It's a great value. I've often preached Sigma as a great Sony alternative, and it's been kind of heartbreaking to see that they haven't had something in the 70-200 range for a number of years. So the E-mount launched February 2011, meaning Sigma hasn't had a lens in this race for over 12 years. And just to give you a bit of backstory, their highly popularized 24-70 that I love and that a lot of people love as an alternative to the Sony, that came out in December 2019. So there's already a 4-year gap between those lenses. I think people have been really dying for Sigma to enter this race, and I really like that they're doing it. Now, some of you might be saying, whoa, Josh, I've actually used this lens before. I've used it already. What are you talking about? How can it be new? Well, that's because for some of Sigma's older lenses, typically the ones made for Canon EF, they've marked those lenses as HSM lenses, and you can kind of see where I'm going. Essentially, for a number of Sigma lenses out there, what they've done is they've built in the MC11 converter from EF mount to E mount onto a typical EF mount lens, and then they've sold it for Sony. Now, they don't have a lens like that specifically in the 70-200 category, so if you have used a Sigma 70-200 70-200 on your Sony camera, it's likely it's been adapted. You know, you will be getting a similar type of lens characteristic from that, but I expect this new lens to be vastly superior in terms of just communication with the camera, autofocus performance, stabilization, and it's going to be smaller than a bulky setup with an adapter as well. So if you have used a Sigma lens in that category, great, but I think this new lens is going to be something special. Let's talk about the distinction of sport versus art. Now, Sigma has long made a name for itself off the back of its art lenses. The APS-C style 18-35 and the 50-100, like those are pinnacle lenses in the micro four thirds space, and using them on Blackmagic Super 35 sensors, stuff like that. Like those lenses are highly regarded as quality lenses, and I've used them in the past, and you know what? They are quality lenses. They're very, very good. I have much less experience with Sigma's sport line, but what they have boasted is that the sporting pedigree will help with autofocus performance and subject acquisition, and also the coatings on the lens will be much less prone to flare and much clearer for those sharp shots. This new lens has been denoted as a sport lens, but they say it will vibe quite well with their existing art zooms, which they expect you to pick up essentially in a set of 3. Now let's talk about the other lenses in that setup, because I quite like them. First, the one I've talked about already, the one I own and use, the Sigma 24-70 F2.8. This is an incredible lens. I don't need to talk it up. Many people have this. And then a lens that we haven't talked about yet is the Sigma 14-24 wide-angle lens. Now this is also a great lens, probably one of the best in its category. I know Sony just announced a new G Master lens that would be fighting this lens off in terms of, you know, what are people going to buy on the wide end, but the Sigma 14-24 has long been an excellent purchase. But that's been the issue. There's never been a 70-200, so we've always been missing the top, and you've had to fill it in with something else. So I'm glad that Sigma has finally finished their holy trinity for E-mount. I'm glad to finally see these 3 lenses come together. It's been a long time coming. Let's talk about photo versus video. I don't think you can go wrong in either regard. I think this lens is going to be great for both. Photo-wise, you're going to be shooting from quite far. Yes, making a bit of compromise in terms of the size of the lens, because these lenses, these long lenses, are often heavier than their shorter counterparts. They're often heavier than the G Master counterparts, but it's not by much. It's a pound, probably less. It's going to be something quite manageable, especially if you're looking to save on price. Now, if you're going for video, similarly, you'll be taking advantage of the optical stabilization, the most likely excellent autofocus, and the advanced coatings that Sigma uses to keep flares down and keep subjects sharp. I don't know how big this lens is going to be specifically, but it does look shorter than their HSM and EF offerings. Like, it looks like a concise package. So I've kind of sprinkled my thoughts throughout this whole piece here, but if I had to kind of summarize, I'm gonna run out and check out this lens. Like, you can kind of see how excited I am about it. I've been using the Sony 70-200 F4, the original version, for a while, and dare I say it's up for replacement. But we haven't talked about perhaps the dark horse in the room here, which is Sony's recently released 70-200 F4 Mark II, which has a bunch of features that I think are going to entice people on the telephoto range. Even though it's an F4, and often when you're shooting at high compression 200mm lengths, that won't matter as much as when you're doing stuff on the medium or wider end. And this new Sony lens has a lot of features that are really interesting. Like, it has a macro mode, it's incredibly light and compact. That lens has a telescopic build, where this one appears to be just a full internal zooming build. So that Sony lens is hyper fast, extremely small, and just good to carry around, and it can do close focus very, very well. Like, it's a very versatile lens, and honestly, if this wasn't going to be announced, I probably would have moved to that in a number of months. It's really interesting, the play out of the 70-200s, but I'm glad there's more competition than ever. I think this lens is going to cater to a lot of middle-of-the-road video photo people who don't want to spend G Master money, but still want the 2.8, and maybe they want the extended length, so they don't go with the Tamron. So I think Sigma knows exactly what they're doing. I think the adjustable aperture ring on this is awesome, because it mirrors what they're doing across their primes and what GM is doing across all of their lenses. So I think it's just an industry trend that I really like. Yeah, I'm excited to use this. There's a not insignificant chance I will own this in the next year. So hopefully it's a good lens, because I've talked it up quite a bit and it hasn't even come out yet. So if the lens is actual garbage, just ignore all this. It won't be garbage. I trust Sigma. Sigma's gonna make a decent lens here. So that about wraps it up. I'm really excited about this release, and tag me in any of the posts that come out when this lens does get released. If it does fall under all these categories. If I do end up being right on this, make sure to tag me about it so I can brag and say that I'm omniscient in reading the lens market. No, I hope you enjoyed. Keep an eye out. Keep an eye out. There's some interesting stuff coming up for the end of the year. Thank you very much for watching. I appreciate that very much. I hope you enjoy your Thanksgiving weekend, and I'll see you in the next video.